Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 96 with Sophie Ackroyd. I had a great conversation with Sophie. We talked about so many things from her journey working for the BBC to managing a recording studio in London to songwriting and producing for artists. We talked about her residency at Spotify's Secret Genius Studios, her approach to artist development, her unique approach to production, communicating with artists, slowing down and self-care during the pandemic, and so much more. I think you're going to love this conversation. So with all that to say, here's my conversation with Sophie Ackroyd here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Sophie Ackroyd. Sophie is a London-based songwriter/producer specializing in pop music. With millions of streams under her belt, her production and songwriting has featured on official Spotify playlists, including New Music Friday Worldwide, New Music Friday UK, New Pop UK, and many more. Former guest of the show, Ruby Smith, recommended I reach out to Sophie, who's graciously agreed to join me on the show. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Sophie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure. So, tell the audience a little bit about your story. How did music start for you? And I guess how did that turn into songwriting and producing?
Yeah, well, I feel like it's quite a long-winded story. Apologies that it's not a succinct explanation. But I guess
stress.
I came to music in a professional sense relatively late. I guess in terms of I didn't start making music or producing at the age of 17. I was kind of mid-20s when I started.
Oh, wow.
But I've always been musical. So as a kid growing up, I was very influenced by my dad's taste in music, and he owned a piano shop. So I hung out there a lot. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, piano is my first instrument, and I was classically trained on that. And then I also was classically trained as a singer when I was a teenager. So music was always a huge, huge part of my life. But I guess I didn't even consider it could be a thing that I could do professionally. I just never considered it as an option. I was quite academic, I guess, and super nerdy. And I kind of ended up going to do an English degree at university without really thinking what I wanted to do. That's what everyone else is doing.
That's the classic thing with an English degree, right? Or a psychology degree. Those are the degrees you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, totally.
And that was fine. I read a load of books, and that was a great experience. But I was kind of always getting into trouble for doing music clubs and activities and putting on gigs and not actually doing my essays or anything. And I don't know, I guess I still didn't realize at the time that music is what I really wanted to do. And it was only a few years later when I was in this job at the BBC, which was a great job.
Whoa. What were you doing at the BBC?
I was in the marketing department for Radio 3. And Radio 3 does a lot of classical music. It does the proms. And that was super cool. I got to go to loads of amazing concerts, but the job was really boring. And I think, as often happens when you're in a job that you're not particularly enjoying, you start thinking about what else could I be doing. And I looked into just doing a songwriting course, because I really loved writing songs, and I'd been doing that my whole life. And I just kind of was curious, and I had absolutely no idea how to get into that. So I was looking at music colleges in London where I was, and I stumbled upon one called ICMP, and just enrolled in a 1-year thing, a short course, I guess. And that was it really. That was kind of the turning point. I absolutely loved it from that moment and decided to make it work from that point. So after that, I stumbled into my first studio job by doing some work experience. And I don't think I realized at the time what a great studio it was. It used to be called Sphere. It no longer exists. The studio Sphere has moved to LA, and the studio that was in the UK is bulldozed and turned into another building, sadly. But when I was there was some amazing producers, amazing mixers, Duran Duran were resident there. It was quite a big studio, not operating commercially. It was mostly like everyone was kind of resident there. And I managed to blag a couple of weeks work experience. And then whilst I was there, the studio manager just left without any notice. And everyone at the studio was like, oh, well, who are we going to get to be studio manager? And I was just like, I'll do it. Wow. And so I ended up being studio manager of this pretty big studio with zero studio managing experience. And that was kind of my first step into studio world, I suppose. And whilst I was there...
It's like really through the back door almost, you know?
Yeah. And that was just such a great place to learn because everyone there was so supportive. And I kind of had just started learning some bits about production. And so I would kind of get as many tips as I could from everyone that was there already, and turned what was the studio manager's office into my own little studio. And that was really the beginning for me of working in studios, which is something that I've kind of continued to do my whole career. And then when that studio closed, I started to look for some kind of assistant engineering work. So I started working for Red Bull Music Studios as an assistant there, which is how I know Ruby.
I was going to say, yeah, okay, cool.
And Red Bull are amazing at kind of nurturing, and I never felt like I was in the wrong for not knowing something. Like, it was very open and you could always ask questions. And so I very much learned on the job about how to be an assistant engineer, how to, run all the outboard equipment and record through a desk. And as I haven't really had any formal training other than the songwriting short qualification that I did, that was really, really valuable to me. And
wow.
So I started to learn about engineering alongside producing, and that's kind of what I've continued to do for a number of years. Is, working in studios has been my bread and butter, I suppose. And then also having my own studio space to work with artists and write songs and produce. That is, I guess, the long-winded story of how I got to where I am now. It's not so bad.
It's not. Yeah, I've had some really long stories, but that's awesome. It's so cool that you were able to like get in, like, whether it was Red Bull or Sphere, and just like learn from other people at the beginning, which is something that I feel like a lot of people are lacking these days. And I know I was lacking also at the very beginning of just like having access to people to give you tips all the time. I mean, I had a little bit of it, but like it's tough now because there's it's kind of like everybody's on their own in their bedrooms.
Yeah, I actually.
So it's so cool that you got that opportunity.
Feel so lucky. That first studio that I worked in, it was a real community, and I think I really learned the value in actually like renting a studio space outside of your own home, because it makes absolutely zero financial sense, especially in London. But I do it a lot for the community that it gives me, because it's those moments that you spend kind of whilst you're making a tea and kind of interacting with other people.
That's really interesting.
And asking what you're working on, and that has often led to other opportunities for me, because everyone in that studio kind of is aware of what you're doing, and vice versa. So I think it's really valuable.
If you place yourself in the center of what's happening, people will get to know you and stuff like that. Yeah. So cool. Well, I know you did a residency at Spotify's Secret Genius Studios. Can you tell the audience what that is and what you did there? What was that?
So Spotify have actually recently rebranded it. It's now called Notable. But basically, Spotify have a department or part of their branding that is kind of lifting up and supporting songwriters and profiling them and putting a spotlight on the people behind the scenes. So kind of anybody except the artists, so the producers, the engineers, the songwriters. And they have several studios, I think 5 or 6 around the world, one in London, one in Canada, and then the rest in America. And they offer those spaces to creators for free, with no strings attached. Like the creators keep all of the rights. I guess it's just Spotify giving back.
It's like an incubator for...
Yeah, I mean, if I was being cynical, I'd say it's to counteract the bad PR that they get.
Yeah, sure.
But the residency that I did, it was an annual thing that they're doing. I don't know if, they haven't done one last year because of the pandemic. I don't know if it's going to be picked up again. I hope it will be. But it's called the Eql Residency. So it's kind of an equalizing program to put women and non-binary engineers into studios. So
cool.
There was 3 at the same time happening in London, Nashville, and LA. And we were all basically working at the Spotify studio for 6 months. It was amazing. It was a real mix day to day because it would be a completely different artist or producer in each day. So from one day to the next, I would be doing completely different kind of recording tasks, but also completely different roles. So some days it would be more engineering. Some days the artist would need a producer. And then some days I got to use the room myself and I could book in artists that I work with.
So they basically said it was like whoever Spotify decided was a resident they would like mix and match between them.
Yeah, so Spotify actually kind of put the people in the room, and they also kind of sometimes run camps, but they kind of engineer the sessions that happen day to day. So
interesting.
Yeah, and then at the end of the residency, we did the 3 residents that had done this job for the past 6 months. We were brought together to work on a project in LA, and we recorded a tune over the course of a couple of days, which was really cool. So yeah, it was
nice.
It was an amazing experience. And I know there is rightfully a lot of kind of bad feeling towards Spotify at the moment, especially for songwriters. And I feel quite conflicted about it because Spotify had given me so much with that residency. I met so many amazing people, and I was being put in a room with people that are my heroes. Like, it was so amazing to even just be witness to people of that league kind of writing songs. So I'm so grateful for that experience. And I think it's such a great initiative as well, to kind of be putting women in studios and recognizing that there's an imbalance there and
sure.
putting measures in place to kind of make that better.
Yeah. Wow. That's totally conflicted. I totally get that. Yeah. It feels like it's like the system. Like, you can't even beat the system. It's like artists are just going to put their songs on Spotify no matter what. You can't only like people, you can only be like the caliber of Taylor Swift to deny something like that.
Totally.
It's not for everybody. Like, and artists are going to create. That's like, there's nothing you could do.
And I think Spotify
right?
is such a great tool for artists if you're independent. And actually, like, where the whole debate over royalties is happening right now is that it's not so much that there isn't enough money being made. There is a lot of money being made. It's just not being distributed in a fair way to songwriters. But if you're an independent artist that owns all your masters and you get a song that makes 1 million streams, you will make a decent amount of money. It's just if you're signed that you won't see that money.
So catch-22.
So yeah, totally.
Did you have like an aha moment when all these things kind of came together and you're like, oh, this is really working, like this whole songwriting, producing thing? Was there a moment that's like this, like that clicked for you?
Yeah, I think there's probably been a few, but I think the first few years for me, the main struggle was like finding a way to survive in London. And I was so scared when the first studio I worked in as studio manager closed, because I had a full-time job and that was kind of stable, and I didn't really know how to make it work as a freelance person. And I think the aha moment really was when I realized people would pay me to produce things.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is something about the system that for songwriters is bad, is that someone will pay to produce a song, but they won't necessarily pay to write one. But when I realized that I could produce and people would pay me to do that, I was like, okay, this is something that could be feasible if I can make this work and get good enough so that people will be happy with what they pay for. And also, I think when I started assisting in studios, that was just amazing. I was like, I can't believe people are paying me to like be in a studio, which I would just like hang out in like for free. Totally. So yeah, and actually more recently, it was funny, just before the pandemic happened, I was trying to shift my focus. I found I was too heavily reliant on my engineering gigs and